This is a home interview, Margaretville, New York. It is the 14th of July 2004, approximately 12:30. The interviewers are Wayne Clarke and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
My name is Alton M. Weiss. I was born in North Tonawanda, New York, way back in 1922, on a cold January day, they tell me. I grew up in North Tonawanda, graduated from school, North Tonawanda High School, in the class of 1939. Worked for the R.T. Jones Lumber Company there for 3 years until the war broke out, and I entered service in November 1942.
Okay. Could I go back a second?
Sure.
Where were you and what was your reaction when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
We were finishing Sunday dinner, and I got a telephone call from a teacher at North Tonawanda High School who had become a personal friend for many years, and I answered the phone, and he told me about it, and I said, I guess we're in it then. So I went along, I continued working. In the summer of '42, I began taking some night courses at the University of Buffalo. I had been stymied by finances in getting a college education, of course, and so I started taking night courses. When the end of the summer came, the draft board chairman in North Tonawanda suggested that I not enroll in any more, and so in late October I began trying to get into the Navy. I enlisted at Buffalo and was accepted on the 6th of November and sworn in on the 9th of November 1942.
Why did you select the Navy?
Well, I favored the Navy. I was scared of the Army, of course, as many of having to fight in a battle, and I figured that if anything happened to me in the Navy, it would be quick and all over. And plus, the comfort of having a home on a ship with meals on a regular basis, I just felt the Navy was better for me.
Okay, where did you go for your basic training?
Sampson. I was in one of the first 3 weeks at Sampson when that base opened, that training base. That's, of course, in the Finger Lakes region. Now it's a state park.
Now, when you were there, we had someone tell us in the past, did you have boats to train in, or did you? They said they had an outline of boats on the ground, and they pretended they were.
We were, of course. I got there in November, and winter set in almost immediately, and there was a new base. I was the 28th Company, Company 428, and there were a lot of facilities that were not opened yet. We basically drilled and had lectures and learned Navy protocol and marched, learned how to react with other members of the company. And I had been lucky. When I enlisted, I was given a rating right off the bat, even though I was new to the Navy. I given the rating of Yeoman 3rd class because I'd had some newspaper experience and worked in a bookkeeping department at R.T. Jones. And so I marched with the company, but about halfway through the company clerk was moved up to battalion clerk, and I became company clerk. Our company did not stay intact for the 13 weeks because a lot of them were opted to go into the armed guard, which was very necessary at that time. And so by the time we were released from training in February, there were fewer than half the members of the original company left. A lot of them had gone to service school too. But since I was already rated, I didn't have that option.
Okay.
And in February, after a boot leave, I was there for a couple weeks more, managed to get home to North Tonawanda on one weekend, and then we're shipped off to Philadelphia Navy Yard Receiving Station, and from there I was assigned to, sent to Baltimore to the pre-commissioning detail of a freighter being converted to an ammunition ship, the USS Sangay. She was being equipped to carry mines. She had been put into service a year earlier as a C-1A diesel-driven freighter, and that was my first ship. And I was with the pre-commissioning detail for about 3 weeks before we were commissioned. We shook down in Chesapeake Bay, loaded up with mines at Yorktown, Virginia, and then went around through the canal out to Hawaii. We had 3,000 mines on. I'm sure if a Nazi sub had known that, we might not have made it, but we did. We made it safely out to first stopped over at San Diego and then on to Pearl Harbor. And for the summer of '43, we more or less shuttled between Pearl Harbor and San Francisco Bay, the Port Chicago ammunition depot in upper San Francisco Bay.
So you were a plank holder?
I'm a plank holder on the Sangay and on my second ship too. We, in November, at the time of the Tarawa invasion, we loaded ammunition and were sent out, this time past Pearl Harbor, to an island called, at that time, Funafuti, now known as Tuvalu. It was a small atoll about 700 miles south of Tarawa, so we didn't actually get to the battle scene, but our purpose was to replenish the ammunition on some cruisers. The Pensacola and Salt Lake City are two of the heavy cruisers that we refurnished ammunition to them after the Tarawa battle.
Now, how did you transfer the ammunition from your ship to the cruisers?
In the May National Geographic, it notes, there's a note on Tuvalu, how low it's gradually sinking into the ocean. The lagoon was very choppy, and we had to come alongside these cruisers, and we banged against them. I think we did more damage to the cruisers than by just banging against them. And there were some exchanges between the captains, because if you were the captain of a cruiser with an ammunition ship banging into you, we did crush some gun tubs in one of their planes, because it was just the choppy seas made it uncontrollable. And shortly after we completed that,
well, how did you literally? Did they have cranes or booms on deck?
Mainly by hand. Mainly by hand. There were booms on the ammunition ship. They weren't particular cranes, but they were the standard Navy type booms or maritime booms that could swing cargo net full of ammunition to that. I was not usually involved in that operation because I was the first lieutenant's yeoman and spent most of the time in his office. Well, while we were there, just a couple days before Christmas, they were sent instructions to furnish one third-class yeoman plus I'm sorry, by that time I'd made second-class yeoman, and they were to furnish one second-class yeoman along with 7 or 8 other ratings for new construction. So we were transferred the day before Christmas, a day or two before Christmas, off the Sangay, off the ammunition ship, to a Liberty ship, the George Julian, which for transportation back to the United States. Well, when I got aboard that ship, it was outfitted with bunks, and I got talking with the steward, and he told me he hadn't touched his books since he left the States 3 months earlier. So I got a nice cushy berth eating with the crew while the other servicemen being transferred, about 1,000 of them, had 2 meals a day, mostly of Vienna sausage and quick meals like that. I was able to eat with the merchant crew till we got back to San Francisco on the 22nd of January. That was my 22nd birthday, as well as the day that the Anzio invasion was started. After 3 weeks at Treasure Island receiving station in San Francisco Bay, I was given delayed orders to report to Seattle or Bremerton Navy Yard for new construction, and I had 30 days delay, so I was able to travel across the country by train to North Tonawanda for a leave, and then back out to Seattle. And he reported into Bremerton Navy Yard, and then was sent back across Lake Washington to Lake Washington shipyards, where the Lake Washington shipyards were building small seaplane tenders for the Navy, and I was assigned to one of those, the USS San Carlos, and after 3 weeks of pre-commissioning detail on that one, we were commissioned and did some shakedown in Puget Sound, and then down the coast to San Diego.
And what time period was that?
That was in March, April, May 1944. We went through shakedown off San Diego, off San Clemente, and off the San Diego Bay, and at that time I had become the first lieutenant yeoman on filling the same capacity I did on the previous ship. But while we were shaking down, the first class yeoman who had been in the pre-commissioning detail, I don't know, he had never been to sea, and he crossed the captain. So one day we were out on preparing to come in, and if you're familiar, they set a watch called Special Sea Details for entering, exiting harbors on a Navy ship. And I was at the first lieutenant's station, and I got a call, a report to the bridge. And when I got up there, the captain handed me the sound-powered phones, and he said, "Take over," as my talker. And so we got the ship back in the harbor, and the next morning when we went out again, I reported to my old station, the first lieutenant. Immediately another call came out over the loudspeaker: "Weiss, lay up to the bridge on the double." And I got there and I got chewed up, and he said, "I told you yesterday to take over," but he didn't stress that it was permanent. Mm-hmm. So that's I became the captain's yeoman then. The original first class was transferred off, and we completed our shakedown and went up to San Pedro for loading, and on the 1st of June, or about the 1st of June, I have to check the exact date, we left for for Hawaii, Pearl Harbor. After an overnight at Pearl Harbor, or I guess we had a day's liberty, we set sail again westward on the Pacific, and crossed the equator in the date line and wound up in the northern Solomons at a place called Green Islands. We relieved another small seaplane tender tending PBYs which were flying Dumbo flights, that is, rescue flights for the Marines who were bombing Rabaul with Corvairs from an airstrip on this little tropical island, Green Islands. And we spent the summer doing that. We did get the Bob Hope show, the Jack Benny shows, gave us a little respite. They shortened the war for a couple hours for us, and while we were there. And in late August, we were relieved by another ship, and we set sail and went via Manus, which is a large harbor, and I think we wound up at Hollandia, which is on the northern coast of New Guinea at that point. And we did some operations out of there. I know we went to the western part of New Guinea to islands called Wendi, W-O-E-N-D-I, and Biak, and Japan. And then we went back to Hollandia and participated in the invasion of Morotai in mid-September. There was not much action there, but about that time they had decided to go into the Philippines, and after another jaunt back to Hollandia, we set sail with a Philippine invasion fleet. After we were at sea, they told us where we were headed, and we were to go in. Our ship was to go in with the bombardment force on the 17th of October, 1944. However, the fleet, this huge fleet, was hit by a typhoon, and we were all at sea in a typhoon on the 17th of October. And the 18th dawned nice and clear and bright, and we sailed into Lady Gulf behind the minesweepers, I remember. And our duty in Lady Gulf was to service the Kingfisher spotting planes for the battle wagons and cruisers doing the shore bombardment. These were the old ships, mainly 5 of them were from Pearl Harbor that had been raised at Pearl Harbor, along with another one. And we had to drop anchor, so we became the first ship to anchor in Lady Gulf in the invasion on the 18th of October, 1944. Well, 2 days later, MacArthur made his appearance, and he has returned. And we were a little bit over the horizon, and we didn't actually see the ceremonies of his wading ashore and making sure he got it recorded on film.
What was your opinion of MacArthur?
Well, he was a great leader. Of course, he met with some disdain in the Navy, but we, of course, like to revel in the fact that we were there before he was. We had done some patrolling up and down the shoreline of Leyte while the while not engaged in actually servicing the spotter planes, which we did off our fantail, which was equipped to take care of seaplanes, but these are smaller planes. And because we had to be at anchor, that made us the first ship to anchor. And we had put in at a couple little bays and inlets, and there I think I had one of the most memorable experiences. We were surrounded, pulled into this one bay with all this lush green scenery, and we were surrounded by dugouts and canoes of the native people there. And first thing you know, we heard all of them singing as loud as they could the Star Spangled Banner. And I think that is one of the most memorable occasions or spots in the war that I can recall. We didn't see much action for a few days, but when it started, it came. We were back up in the main part of the Gulf below Tacloban one day when it was morning. We were at morning general quarters, and suddenly to our port side a 2-engine Japanese bomber was flying low across the water directly towards us. And we opened up with the guns, and when I'd say he couldn't have been more than 70, I don't know, feet, yards from us when one of our 5 inches hit him and blew him out of the water. And then we picked up a lot of debris and a couple souvenirs, which I still have, a piece of the tire and a pack of the pilot's cigarettes. And
now what kind of armaments did your ship have?
We had 3 5-inch guns similar to what destroyers had, and we had 2 twin 40mm anti-aircrafts, and we had 1 quad 40 where a destroyer's number 4 gun on the aft would have been. And then along with, I forget how many 20 millimeters. And everything was going at them.
Okay, we're rolling again.
Okay, well, that, of course, was the first time we had ever been under attack, and the closest call I think that we had. We did continue operating in Leyte Gulf as the invasion, as the operation developed, and we were down in Surigao Strait one day, but we had orders to go back to the command ship at off Tacloban. And while we were up there is when the Japanese decided to come around up through Surigao Strait and through San Bernardino Strait, and we didn't know at the time. We knew there was a battle going on, and that these old battleships that we had been tending their planes were arranged in the perfect T, and were wiping out the that arm of the 2 Japanese fleets that had come out through Surigao Strait. But we were a little over the horizon, so we missed. We would have had a front row seat if we hadn't been called back to Tacloban. But that's one of those things. You wonder why you were called back, but are grateful that you were.
Now, did you hear the gunfire and,
yeah,
and see, did you see flashes in the sky in the night?
Then, but the scariest part when we found out that the big stuff had come through, returned through, circled through San Bernardino Strait and was coming down the coast and would have had us, they figured on getting us in a pincher. But we'll always owe a debt of gratitude to those 18 little carriers and 3 or 4 destroyers and DEs that stood off the whole Japanese fleet while Halsey had taken our big stuff and gone off in pursuit of those carriers. We didn't find that out right on a couple days, for a few days, but we just know that a few days later when the Army Air Force started moving in, we were very grateful because meanwhile we had shot down a couple more Japanese dive bombers who were coming in to attack us while we were in these little bays. With the exception of one trip back to Hollandia, we stayed there pretty well until for the rest of the year. That's at that time, Christmas 1944, we were being shown a movie at night on the fantail, which was more or less a routine thing after things settled down. And the Japs they weren't attacking, but they were sending planes over. We were interrupted, I think, 17 times. That we had to break off the movie and go to general quarters. And I think at midnight the captain asked if we wanted to continue the movie, and the response was yes. It was a Van Johnson, June Allison movie, which we pinned down to Two Girls and a Sailor, I think was the name of it. And so about 3 o'clock in the morning we finished the movie. We were in a period, a 3-week period, where we hadn't seen a supply ship in a long time. So for 3 weeks our meals consisted of corned beef hash and Spam. In the morning they would prepare Spam one way. At noon there would be corned beef hash prepared one way. At night it'd be back to Spam prepared a different way. Alternate days were corned beef, Spam, corned beef, Spam, corned beef, Spam. That went on for 3 weeks, including Christmas dinner. We finally had our regular Navy Christmas dinner, I think the 28th or 29th of December, when we finally met a supply ship. We hung around in Lady Gulf for a couple months, and then we were sent around through Saga and up to Mindoro, which had been secured in February. And from there we were sent into Manila Bay, where they were just putting there was still some action on Corregidor. We set up our operation on off Sangley Point, which had been the old Navy base off Cavite in about halfway up Manila Bay. And we were tending, previously, after being shifted from the Dumbo PBYs, we had tended Black Cat Patrol PBYs, and they were quite successful operation. In fact, one of the squadrons we were tending set a record for number of Jap ships sunk in one night in Black Cat patrols. That's backing up a little bit. After we arrived in Manila Bay, they began replacing the PBYs with PBMs, the Martin Mariners. And that's where we sat out the war. Towards the end of July, we had our original captain had been having some health problems, and while we were in Manila Bay, we got a replacement. He was relieved, and fine old man. In those months from the time he gave me hell for not staying with him, not as his talker, we developed a fine relationship. I took all his dictation and was his talker in battle stations, and I really grew, quotes, fond of him. Mm-hmm. And then this new captain took over, and we were not doing, by that time the war was actually winding down. The PBMs weren't doing as much bombing. They were doing some experimental testing with what they call jet-assisted takeoff, where they would, jet engines were just being developed, and they were using a device called JATO, jet-assisted takeoff, to shorten their run across the water for takeoff. And some of our planes were involved in that. One of my jobs was every night about 10 o'clock, the executive officer would come in and dictate the plan of the day for the following day to me to transfer to mimeograph for distribution throughout the ship. On the night of August 6, 1945, and I think that date is going to live in history, he came in, and at the conclusion of the plan of the day, he said, add this paragraph: we have received orders to return to Bremerton for some ship alterations. Don't tell your folk, don't put it in your correspondence yet. We had been allowed to say that we were somewhere in the Philippines, but the ship's crew was warned not to put it in any correspondence. But that night of August 6th, I think you'll understand why the atom bomb is looked at as my ticket home, and our ticket home, I should say. And a few days later, the other bomb was dropped, and we were on our way home. And it was uneventful. We had sailed through the area where the Indianapolis had been sunk a week earlier, but we weren't aware of it. And we made it back to, first week we made it to Eniwetok, anchored overnight there, and then the second week to Pearl Harbor and overnight, and then got into Bremerton on the 1st of September, just as MacArthur was having the Japanese sign the documents on the Missouri. And
what was the reaction to the dropping of the atomic bombs?
Oh, it was great. We got this wonderful big bomb. We didn't know how,
right,
at what great cost, or the effects of it at that time. It was just that, hey, we got a bomb, we beat them. And we were overjoyed. I hope we never have to use it again, but we'll always, I think the fellows, most of the fellows that were on my ship will look at it on that as our ticket home. And perhaps that doesn't go well with certain factions, but
no, that's been the sympathy. That's what most of the fellows have said. You know, they said that if it wasn't for the bomb, you know,
sure,
there would have been probably a million more American lives lost. So.
We felt that way. We were getting ready to move on, out of wondering what we were going to do after Manila Bay. We hadn't been called to Okinawa or Iwo Jima. Would it be all right if we broke off this for a while till maybe I would get a better feeling about it.
Okay, we're rolling. I think we were at the end of the war.
Yeah, back to Seattle. We went in the shipyard at Bremerton to begin the alterations to the ship, and we were all given leave, 3 weeks, 2 groups, 3 weeks at a time. I went home, and that's when I managed to get a plane flight out of Seattle to Buffalo, and that's when I found out my dad had to have his surgery. Well, I went, the surgery wasn't scheduled before I had to go back, so I went back to Washington, and meanwhile I developed a situation where I had to go in the hospital. So while the ship was still in dry dock, I got transferred off to the Bremerton Navy Hospital for some surgery, and the captain sent word that he wanted me back aboard by Sunday because the repairs were completed and they were getting ready to sail for San Diego. But the doctor at the hospital decided that no, I'm not going back. So instead the ship sailed without me, but I got delayed orders to report to Pier 92 in New York, so I was able to be home with my dad and mother throughout his surgical period, and that's what, of course, when we had to meet the bills. And anyway, after I reported back into Pier 92 on the day after Christmas 1945, said the following day I was put out shoveling coal on the old battleship Oregon from Spanish War fame, because that was furnishing heat for Pier 92. And I came close to getting court-martialed because I found out that first-class petty officers were exempt from that, but once I was picked for it, they picked me without realizing that I had the rating. And you can't back out of it. Even though I mouthed off about it, I threatened with a court-martial. So I shoveled coal, which added to my experience in the Navy. And then I was sent up to Fort Schuyler, and after being making chief and being discharged at Lido Beach, Long Island on the 21st of March, 46, I was invited by the Fort Schuyler people to be a member of the training ship crew on their first post-war training cruise. So we went to, the cruise took us to Bermuda. It was an old Army transport that had been converted that turned over to the Academy. And we went to Bermuda and down through the canal and down to Peru, and then back through the canal into Havana and back up the coast just in time to get off to Syracuse University. And as I said, well, I went through the 4 years at Syracuse, but as a member of the reserve, I served at the Naval Training Center, which was built outside Syracuse, Liverpool. And for 2 summers, I was in ship's company. That gave a summer job. And but then after we got out of college and loafing around Lancaster and Buffalo, and when Korea broke out, we decided that was enough, and that was it. One of the interesting things I forgot to mention on serving on that training cruise as a civilian crewman for the state, we pulled into the harbor, into the dock at Cristobal in the Canal Zone, and there tied up to the same dock was San Carlos, my ship.
Oh, darn.
So I had 8 months later, a reunion with fellows from my ship, and that was the last reunion we had until last fall, our first reunion in 59 years.
Wow.
So, And
well, I'm sorry.
excuse me.
Finish your.
That pretty well finishes me.
Now you did make use of the GI Bill then.
I didn't. Fortunately, I had to turn to the GI Bill. And
did you ever make use of the 5220 Club?
No.
Okay.
No, I never used unemployment until I lost my job with a newspaper after 30 years, and I had a few months on that until I started my own business.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
Yes, I joined the American Legion post here, but I am not what you call active in it.
Okay.
I've turned down any offers to become an officer, and I don't even parade anymore because one thing, my kidney problem started developing, and the other was I like to remember my brother my own way.
Okay. Did you ever stay?
Emotionally, I don't think I could sit through it anymore.
Yeah. Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that served with you?
Yes, I had one fellow on the first ship for several years, and then we kind of lost track. And on the second ship, I have stayed close contact with two shipmates. And since the talk of reunion, I have built up a list of about 25 or more, which I have put into a database as survivors. Several of those have died since I set up my database, but that's all we were able to get information on.
How do you think your time in the service changed or had an effect on your life?
I certainly had to bring about instant maturity. I had a feeling, like many young people do, is let the Europeans fight their own wars and let's stay out of it. But I felt that while I did not rush out after Pearl Harbor Day to join, I waited 8 or 9 months. I have always maintained a pride. It's nothing I would ever want to do again, but I'm proud for having done it. I wouldn't trade the experience of having done it for anything. The feelings now, of course, that I feel strongly that despite all the harassment that he's getting, our president is doing the only thing that he could do. When our country is attacked, you go after them, whoever and wherever they are. They didn't do that to Roosevelt when Pearl Harbor was attacked. Why should they do it to? Because we have been at war since September 11th. Make no mistake.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the interview.